Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of In Lay Terms. I'm your host, Payman Ascari, and today with me is Mr. John-Paul Berg, also known as JP. How are you doing, JP?
Good, sir. It's nice to meet you.
It is. I'm really glad. Usually, there's like weeks of back and forth with me and my guests, but lickety split. We met yesterday, and you're like, "I'll come on today." So thanks.
Absolutely. That's the pace of modern discourse on X, right? Quick
Yeah,
connection.
24 hours. That's all you got.
Yeah.
JP, we'll get into like who you are and what you do, but I thought maybe if we could start, if you could tell the audience a little about who you are, where were you born, where were you raised, and what have you seen change in Canada?
Certainly. I was born in Toronto, 1983. I was raised in Cape Breton. Presently, I'm residing in Halifax. I'm an industrial janitor by trade. Um, my wife is a receptionist, and we live in a building in a very working class part of the HRM. Um, just to give you some perspective on the change, it was $900 for a two bedroom unit in 2020. Presently, in the same building, that two-bedroom unit is going for $2,400, which is just it's dramatic, and it's not feasible for any type of a life here. At the same time, the wages have stagnated. Now, for me personally, looking at the political scope in Canada, it's to hear Pierre Poilievre, who is expected to win quite a significant majority, not address the primary concern of mass migration and the numbers, and more specifically, the inadequate infrastructure to accommodate the influx of people. Like, Canada brought in a lot of people through various flaws in programs, and we had zero infrastructure to accommodate them. And what it did is it's pricing the working class out of the country, essentially. It's the primary factor for the raise in rents, regardless of his whole spew about the carbon tax. I find that disingenuous. It's to mention the carbon tax presently in Canada is like referencing the lawn needing to be mowed while the house is on fire. I think that's a pretty accurate analogy. And I was supporting Pierre politically, very publicly. I have a modest following on X here, but I changed. I watched the Jordan Peterson podcast with Pierre. I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson, and I was expecting him to push him on some of the topics that concern me, which is primarily the radical gender ideology and the mass migration. And it's like they conveniently managed to talk around those issues, especially the radical gender ideology, considering that's Jordan Peterson's, shtick, for lack of a better term. He likes to speak about that, and I like his views on that. So I was really looking forward to hearing Pierre finally lay out exactly how he feels on this topic. And I just felt like there was some kind of deal made. It was very disingenuous. And subsequent posts of Pierre with the sloganeering, it got too much for me. So I publicly denounced support, and I'm politically homeless presently. Yeah, I went off topic there. That wasn't quite just about me, but it gives you a rundown of how we met, essentially, and decided to have this conversation.
All right, so I got a whole whack of questions for you.
Bring on.
You said rents went within 4 years; they went from about 900 to 2,400.
Yeah, and that's in the building that I'm currently residing in. So it's not conjecture or hyperbole to make a point. This is my reality. Now, with that said, in Nova Scotia, we have like a cap where they're only allowed to raise rents so much each month, but it's a certain percentage. I believe it's 2 to 4% every 6 months. I'm don't quote me on that, but they're gradually increasing significantly. And the biggest thing is the market dictates the value. I think people that don't understand a lot about economics, they want to reduce it to like some greedy landlord. It doesn't matter how greedy your landlord is. If the market is set up that way, if I'm a greedy landlord and I'm going to charge an extra $500 for a unit, and it's subject to the free market, I'm not going to get any interest in that unit. So I mean, it's obviously relative to inflation in this market. With the, like I said, it's not just the mass migration and too many people too fast. I think it's the absence of adequate infrastructure to facilitate them. I think it's not only resulting in this. I think it's fairly obvious that it would result in this. So like, I mean, I don't want to get conspiratorial and go off into the weeds, but it makes me think that this isn't the result of incompetence. It's more the result of design in some way. Somehow someone's benefiting from this, and that's what's essentially the causation for all of our economic woes presently.
My conspiracy theory is that they're trying to steal people's assets. So if the property value increases, that means your property taxes go up. But if
Right.
there's a rent freeze, the landlords are specifically the ones that have like one extra unit. They're getting squeezed out, and they probably get
Mm-hmm.
bought out by the banks or
That's right. Yeah.
hedge funds.
And that's another thing that's occurring presently at the same time in the market is there's these massive hedge funds that are acquiring all of the housing, right? Like it's when you're bidding on a home in Canada, you're generally up against a big conglomerate of some kind that's purchasing housing to control the market essentially.
So these hedge funds, they don't always have to be big bad BlackRock. Like the unions, public sector unions, apparently are the biggest rental owners in Canada.
That doesn't surprise me. Public sector unions have unprecedented political power presently. Financially, they're just it's a big problem. I don't have the expertise to comfortably to discuss that too much, but it's a concern of mine for sure. I don't like that these public unions can essentially shut the country down. You know what I mean? Like that's rather disconcerting from someone again who's coming from a position of ignorance with it all. That's my concern there. But yeah, their financial influence is definitely notable. I mean, but again, and maybe I'm wrong. Look, I have no credentials or expertise in anything. As an average, ordinary Canadian, this has been the way I've been interpreting it, and it seems to line up with my common sense and very limited understanding of economics, right? Supply and demand dynamics. If you're going to bring in like millions of people into a country without reinforcing the infrastructure, be it housing, the healthcare system, then this is going to occur inevitably. And also the healthcare issue, like there's millions in Canada without access to a GP. There's people actually, and now these are anecdotal occurrences, but there's people that are dying in waiting rooms in Canada. That's outrageous. It's hard to imagine how much apathy and complacency exists within the electorate of Canada to allow this happening without more pushback. Like to watch this occur, that's been a disconcerting aspect for me to see, because I'm very passionate about these issues. It bothers me. I'm watching in real time a country that I grew up in and loved just be depleted within a decade, and it kills me. And this is coming from the lowest rung of the working class. I have no interest beyond my own personal interest. My family is struggling in this economy, and I'm seeing the real time repercussions of all these failed policies. So it's definitely coming from a sincere place with me. And the biggest thing is I'm tired of feckless politicians that call themselves conservative in Canada that don't have the integrity to touch on a contentious issue. Clearly, Pierre is avoiding these contentious issues because he doesn't want to alienate a powerful demographic. It's a disingenuous political play, as opposed to right now. I think the climate in the country would be better served by just pure truth, just honesty, and people that have the integrity to give their interpretation of it. There is no, I mean, in lots of these realms of discourse, there's no right or wrong. This isn't mathematics. It's more philosophical, right? So it's, you got to actually say how you interpret it and how you think. If we're going to pragmatically resolve anything, that's just how I interpret it. And I find that discourse isn't occurring on any level whatsoever presently. So
Um, I agree with you on that. Like the sloganeering, it's kind of It's
Tiresome.
reached its limit, you know?
Yeah,
Like, people want actual solutions. I think what happens is they look at Trump, and, Trump is bombastic and he's over the top, and they
sure.
assume that he's talking in slogans, but he actually does give solutions. We
That's
will
right.
deport this many people,
Mhm.
and this is how I will deport them. These are the people we will appoint to the judiciary. But
Mhm.
in Canada, it's just like, we're going to make Canada great again. Okay, how?
That's right. Like Canada has 80% of our Senate presently is comprised of Trudeau appointees that are essentially radical left progressive activists. How is Pierre going to pass anything? Like that's a real question. That's what Jordan Peterson should have asked him. And it's obvious. And there's a lot of Canadians like me that, man, I've been towing the line. I've been apologizing for this guy. Like, look, he's got to appeal to a super progressive electorate. He's got to win Toronto. He's got to, whatever it is, whatever the argument or the rationale is. And I've been in denial about it. Not even denial, like willful denial, thinking like, oh, well, I hope Pierre is going to do the things that he's not brave enough to say, like the things I need to hear. I need reinforcement on it. And I know he's very vaguely gave a position regarding gender ideology and parental rights, but it was someone caught him off guard and he felt obligated to ask. He's never really addressed that thoroughly or adequately. It's disconcerting. I see more of the fake facade of the political discourse. Like, let me go into a quick analogy here. So, if you were a fan of wrestling, now I know this sounds a little out of left field, but there's a concept in wrestling like WWE, which is kayfabe. It's an act. It seems like political, or it seems like theater. And everyone's in on it. And the wrestlers back in the day, like your Hulk Hogan and your Macho Man, they had to act like they really disliked each other, but really they were all making money, and it was a massive facade. A lot of people knew it. I feel like that when I'm watching political discourse in Canada today. It seems like a massive puppet show with very bad actors sloppily regurgitating scripted rhetoric, feckless scripted rhetoric. And it's more than leaving a poor taste in my mouth. I feel demoralized. I do. And then they wonder why so many Canadians were kind of more apprehensive to listening to Trump saying, his trolling regarding the 51st state. Of course we are. If you're not, at least wanting to hear an offer on that, then you're not paying attention to politics in Canada presently.
The only thing I was thinking about is it's a shame that in Parliament they don't go full WWE and smack chairs at each other.
Yeah, honest to God. Now that would at least make it watchable. At least we could get some entertainment value for literally them taking like the immensity of taxation. It's a good segue into taxation. Like, I'm a working class dude, man. I'm a janitor. I work overtime as much as I can, as much as it's available. My wife's a receptionist. My daughter's moved on to college and off on her own essentially. So we are feeling the economic crunch so bad in our 2-bedroom apartment in a very working class neighborhood of Halifax that we had to take on a roommate, just to kind of compensate for how bad we're being squeezed in this economy. Like, I'm 41 years old, and I'm thinking like, forget about retirement. I have no savings put away. Like, I'm scraping by each month. And again, that's not hyperbole. I have no ulterior motives. I'm not trying to tell a story here. I'm just trying to tell the truth as I see it. And that's wherein my concerns lie. So when I can feel this very visceral, real, tangible occurrence of today's economy in my own life and in my friends, I see all my friends struggling. And then I look and I see, again, empty, vacuous rhetoric from these political figures. It feels fake to me. And again, I'll utilize the same adjective. It's demoralizing to see as a member of the electorate. Like, who do I vote for? Honestly, like, and it's just, again, it's a very frustrating time if you're paying attention and you actually care about this country. It's frustrating.
So the reason I asked you about the 900 to 2400, my question was like, how are you getting by? Are you digging into your savings? Are
So
you
for
just
me, I'm lucky. I'm only paying 1,600 now. because I was in earlier and it was only able to be raised so much relative to the provincial rental cap. Now, other provinces don't have a rental cap, so it's just they're allowed to up your rent as you go. So essentially, you're grandfathered in from the time you start at the rental. So I started my rental when it was a lot lower than it is presently. I was that's the price of a new. If you were to walk into my apartment building presently and get a 2-bedroom apartment, that's what they're going for. For everyone else that was already here before, as the price was accruing, they're grandfathered in, and they're only allowed to raise it so much every 6 months. I believe it's either 2 or 4%. Might even be slightly higher. I'm not confident on that number, but generally twice a year our rent goes up like $50. It's like slowly being strangled, right? Like, I mean, we don't got much room as working class Canadians, and like I say, I don't say it with pride, but I certainly don't say it with shame, sir. I'm the bottom rung of the working class. I'm an industrial janitor, and my wife's a receptionist, and we're trying to just live in Halifax and perpetuate our lives, which are not luxurious by no stretch of the imagination. And these are the very real problems we're encountering. Like I said, we feel very blessed that we got a roommate, and I know him personally. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement for us economically, but that's the economic reality for working Canadians. We have to now kind of live with each other in order to just scrape by in this economy. It's terrible to see the decline of this country in the last decade.
Is there any like psychological effect? Because I've talked to even doctors, like they say they can't, the uncertainty means that they can't plan for their future. Do you and your wife have that same sense where you just don't know what the rents are going to be in 2 years?
I think absolutely. In a more practical way, we analyze it. We're pretty solid people psychologically. Like, for me personally, I'm a Catholic person. I don't want to discuss my religion or anything, but I find great solace in that. That supersedes all of this. That gives me the strength to persevere regardless of what I encounter. At least I like to think that. I don't want to sound too egotistical, but no, we're not experiencing psychological problems. We're just working harder, man. I use the metaphor of a treadmill. It's a treadmill economy. I'm on the treadmill, and I'm not the most in shape guy. I'm giving it all I got, and we're not making any progress, right? Like, you're stationary economically, and it's, how do we retire? How are me and my wife going to retire comfortably? That's scary. What if we have a health issue and one of us has to stop working? We don't have no savings. They're depleted just living. There is nothing to save in this economy, sincerely. On top of that, like, you look at the statistics that Polyev quotes. We used to be at parity with America 9 years ago for standard income, and now we're 60% of what America is. Like, that's a decline by almost half in and it translates into the quality of life of the working class and the middle class. The middle class is being eroded, and the working class is being strangled. It's just not a good climate politically. And then right now we have an American administration coming in that's taken a publicly adversarial position against us, trade-wise. There's going to be a massive imposition of tariffs, and no one's steering the ship. Trudeau evidently is going to head up these negotiations, even though he stepped down. That wasn't a big scheme to just prolong his influence in Canada. It's, again, and I'm rambling a little bit, man, but like, I go back to, like, how can we be that apathetic? How can we be that complacent? How can we tolerate this much without some practical or pragmatic solutions, without us getting angry at the very least? And I'm not saying being violent or anything. My God, I'm totally opposed to that. But getting organized, grassroots level, starting to really, I think a lot of Canada put its faith in the Conservative Party, and that's where I was. And I've been in denial for the last year about it because they're seemingly petrified to speak to any of the issues that concern me. So I just gotten to the point, for me personally, I can't support them anymore. And then that kind of leaves me in this position where I say politically homeless. I don't know what to do for Canada except start to have these conversations. And I mean, that's all I could do. Maybe I'll see a clear path in the future.
No, I wanted to talk about solutions. I mean, the easy one would be to deport the people that their visas will expire. So you kind of release, it's like a pressure valve release.
Sure,
That
sure.
would help. And then I guess we need to drastically reduce the amount of immigration coming in. Are those the two main solutions?
Well, yeah, and we used to have a point system in Canada. It was the envy of the industrial world because it would grant people points based upon things that made them desirable to Canada. Canada is a prosperous country. We don't just let people in. You have to have something to offer. We have to know that you're going to be able to contribute to the country. We only took good candidates, essentially. And I'm not trying to demonize any of the immigrants that are coming in. They're great people, man. It's nothing like that. It's no ethnocentric bullshit. Like it's no white stuff. Like Canada's always been relatively multi-ethnic, but there was a cultural feeling. There was a national pride, and that's long gone. Like it's been diluted. Like I grew up in a multicultural little town, an enclave of Cape Breton called Whitney Pier. There was blacks and natives, there was Italians and Jews and people from the Middle East, and but the underlying premise is we were all Canadians. We were all even better than that. We were all Cape Bretoners. There was a sense of community still, and I truly believe that we can have that again. It's just you can't bring people into a system like that too fast, or it's going to augment the direction. It's going to upset the balance. And what's happened in the last 10 years in Canada is it's you look to Europe, it's a very similar thing. It's seemingly some kind of weaponized mass migration. Like you'd have to not be paying attention to not think that someone's trying to intentionally hurt our countries in some way.
What do you think their goal is with all this mass migration?
Destabilization. People that are into those George Soros conspiracy angles, it's like reflexive economics, like he's looking to cause a problem to then benefit off of it capitalistically in some regard. I think it's deeper than that. I think it's like all tyrants of the past. I've studied history for an amateur quite thoroughly, and there's a similar theme that you encounter. It's these tyrants, in many cases, truly believe it's for your own good. They, for whatever reason, megalomania not being one of them, most likely, they convince themselves that what they're trying to impose on the people is truly for their own good. Even if we can't see it, and even if we reject it vehemently, it's still for our own good. And that's when you get into a really scary situation politically, and historically, that's when atrocities occur. And I think the elites, the corporate globalists, whatever you want to call them, I don't know what they are. I clean toilets, man. But whatever you want to refer to them as in the nomenclature, like, but there is a ruling class. They're squeezing us so hard now that we're essentially we're kept servants. The working class Western person, especially Canadian, I can't speak to anything else. I won't. But the working class Canadian person it's like indentured servitude. I'm indentured to the Corporation of Canada. I get just enough to make enough to house myself and feed myself and transport myself to my job. That's my reality, and there's millions of me. Um, Many of them just can't articulate it, and that's why I'm really pushing this now. I have no again, I have no nefarious intentions with anything. I'm not. I like to have a little following. I'm liking being able to reach people, but I just want to tell the truth. Like people are hurting. We're genuinely hurting, and no one's speaking to the core issues of the premise. Now you're. I don't know much about you, sir. I just told myself I'm going to accept every offer essentially, and talk to people and be honest and have an open discourse. But I did see that you're running for the PPC party. Are you currently a candidate federally?
Yeah, I just got tired of complaining about the problems, and I'm like, I got to run for a federal party. I decided
Mhm.
federal, and I looked at the different platforms. NDP Liberals were out. The Conservative Party was very light on descriptions of what they stand for, and the
Sure.
PPC had a really good platform. I was like, this is going to be a very difficult run because we don't have brand recognition, but at least I can speak for what I believe in.
That's right. That's right. Good for you, man. Good for you. I'm likely gravitating more towards the PPC personally. And honestly, I don't mean any offense because I looked into the platform. I like it. The reason I didn't kind of support that initially is because it seems so unlikely that there's going to be any ground made, right? Like I'd love to see PPC get some seats, but the way they're perceived, the way there's the perception from a marketing aspect in Canada, it seems negative. Like on X, there's lots of trolling back and forth. I hate to see conservatives with essentially the same goals shitting on each other so blatantly, but you see it presently with the CPC and the PPC. But I don't know, honestly, and again, this is from the outside looking in, just a total opinion, and I hope you take no offense. Like when I look at Bernier, without offering any opinion of him, I think he seems like a man with integrity. I'm not going to question anything like that. But it didn't happen. It's been 2 years. So maybe it's his charisma. Maybe it's his appeal in the market presently in Canada, but something doesn't seem to be working at the leadership level. And that would be a concern of me as someone who would potentially want to throw my support behind the PPC. I know that's a conflict for you to really comment on.
No, it's fine. We talk with headquarters all the time about these things, like the by-elections that haven't gone our way. Each one, makes it harder for us candidates. What we're trying to do is we're treating it like a citizen sort of initiative. So every single candidate, it's all hands on deck, and we're trying to flood the community with the message as much as possible. And we're trying to get at least one candidate elected. Like, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter which one of us wins, but if we can pierce that just hold on the political system right now, because as you mentioned, it's a circus. Like the parliament is supposed to be sacred. It's supposed to be, the best and the brightest go in and they represent us. And they're just swearing at each other. They're just mocking each other.
Yeah, it's really lowbrow, and it's very scripted. As someone, again, from a working class background, I can size that up immediately. It's just nonsense. It's theater. It's like circuses. It's funny you use that term. I thought of like the Roman thing, like bread and circuses. Like you know what I mean, right away. And this is a big aspect of the circus in Canada. The distraction of it, the tribalistic thing. Like since I publicly denounced Pierre Poilievre, and I've expressed my reasoning why ad nauseum. I have no problem articulating my thoughts on any given issue. So there's paragraphs upon paragraphs of why and why I feel like that's the pertinent move for me to make presently. And everyone's like, oh, so what, you're a PPC bro? And it's like, you small-minded little fool. It's like that's how you perceive the political discourse in Canada, like it's hockey teams. Like the PPC and the CPC or the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs, that's disingenuous. The way to properly, appropriately frame the political scene in Canada is you have the people, the citizenry, and you have the ruling class, the political class. Now, they may be divided up there, but your primary solidarity should stand with the citizenry and what's best for the citizenry. Now, it's unfortunate because the news media is intended to be the fourth estate in any democratic system. We need, because, I mean, working people don't have time to pay attention to political discourse. So when the news media has integrity, when there's journalistic integrity, and they're scrutinizing our public servants and then providing digestible information to an electorate, well, then we have an informed electorate. We have not had anything close to an informed electorate in Canada. I don't know if we ever did, man. The news has been that biased with various interests. We're just getting fed narratives. So now with X becoming prevalent in Canada, we're actually getting journalists that have no ulterior motives, citizen journalists that will scrutinize the political figures and the public servants. And I think that's a net positive. I think it's going to change everything. I don't think most people involved in politics even understand how much of a game changer that is. You don't have compliant little, journalists that are posing questions that were pre-rehearsed, and the answers like you're going to be scrutinized by people that are feeling the effects of your policies. And people like me, I'm a regular citizen. I'm building a modest following. I intend to continue building it to make my political voice as loud as it could be. And it's going to be such a different Canada. It's going to be such a different world relative to that one development, the decentralization of information. is just the repercussions shall be profound.
So you're spot on that one. Like the media abdicated its role as the educator of the electorate, and now
Mm,
independent citizens are stepping up as journalists.
that's right.
Um, I'm going to tell you something I've seen when I go. My strategy is not to like beat up on the Conservative Party. I just don't see that.
Sure.
I don't see the point in that. So I
Yep.
go in and I try to talk about policy. You know, what should we do with immigration? How should we reform our banking system? And every time I get shut down and they want to transition to tactics, the PPC is polling like this. Your funding is like that. Why did you do this in the last, by-election? And it's even on X, they don't want to talk about the issues. They don't want to have a discussion. They want to shut you down. It's really alarming.
Well, and it's seemingly the motivation is seemingly obvious because they don't want to alienate certain demographics of the electorate. And that's disingenuous. So when people say like, oh, well, Pierre's just trying not to, so he's trying not to alienate the super liberal people from voting for him. It's like, so essentially what you're saying, and you're trying to make an argument for is he's lying for his own benefit, but it's for his own benefit. And that's honestly like, that's exactly what they're saying. I can't see it any other way. And I was kind of like, look, man, it's desperate measures type of a scenario for me. I'm going to just see how it goes. And then, like I said, my pivotal moment was the Jordan Peters, because I'm a massive fan of Jordan Peterson. I've read everything he's written. I've watched endless hours of his lectures. Just a real, I think highly of the man as a thinker, and I think of him as a principled man. So then I kind of diminished my view of him because he obviously talked with Pierre prior to that. Jordan should have pushed him. Number one, how do you expect to make any headway with our Senate? With our Senate being essentially, you can't it's so full of Trudeau appointed radicals that I just don't see how we pass anything. And then we stagnate until the next election, and then the socialists have a chance to cater to our low information electorate and
Yeah,
get elected
yeah.
again. It's terrifying.
Yeah, so let me come to the defense of Pierre Poilievre. I get where he's coming from. So his view is, in order for me to make change, I have to get in, and in
Yeah.
order to get in, I have to win the urban centers. Like I get that, but what I always say, and I used to support the Conservative Party. I was part of their EDA. Well, I tried to. I always say, like, what is your strategy to get from here, where we're lying to get the urban vote, to what are we just going to magically snap to being more common sense, limited government? Like, walk me through that step.
That's
And
right.
that's not going to happen. Like when
No.
you go in making promises, you're pretty much going to stick to those promises.
Yeah. I mean, again, I attribute it to cowardice. I mean, look, I think people would be so refreshed. People don't realize one aspect of Trump. What caught everyone off guard and really rubbed a lot of people the wrong way is how candid he was when he was speaking. Clearly he's not trying to present a disingenuous product. You know what I mean? Like, he's not up there with his broadcaster voice acting like he's an infallible human being. And I'm
My
a
fellow
perfect
Americans. Yeah.
Christian man. Yeah. And I love the children, and just bullshit. You know what I mean? And we could see through that, man, but we're so conditioned to that fake politician that when we seen a real man get up there and make mistakes and stumble over himself, but really be authentic, it resonated. And I think it will resonate in Canada too. I think once someone's charismatic and has the integrity to actually speak real truth, even if it's unpopular, real truth is awkward. There's a good reason why most people don't speak the truth often, because it's a burden. You have awkward conversations. You have to people want to challenge your perspective. But that's, I think, one of the biggest problems. We're not having real conversations. We're walking on eggshells to not offend certain aspects of the community, and I think it's doing us a major disservice.
So I want to go back to something you said. Let's leave aside conservative
Sure.
partisanship, whatever. Um, so the working class, you said there's about 1 million of us, and you guys are getting squeezed, right? All of Canadians are getting squeezed. What's going to happen when housing becomes so unaffordable? And this goes back to what you said about how government creates a problem and then solves it. Is this
So
government making housing unaffordable? So then they'll come in, they'll be like, all right, I guess we have to nationalize
that's
housing
how I
now.
see it. That's how I see it. In nationalization, it's look, man, it's like that the old colloquialism. Socialist policies create an economic issue. Um, they externalize guilt, blaming the greedy capitalists. Then they suggest more socialism as a solution, and they further socialism. It's like the snake eating its own tail. And you're seeing that in real time in Canada in multiple dimensions of our economy and our world. Yes, that's I think exactly. I think they want to nationalize the food control too. I think they want to nationalize the grocery service. I think we have a very radical Marxian left influence in this. I call them the illiberal party of Canada because I won't refer to non-liberal people as liberal. That's silly. I refuse to do that. I always make it a point to call them the illiberal party. But yeah, that's clearly of the radical left. They want like a socialized government, and that's kind of been the path we've been on. That's the motivating factor behind a lot of the problems we're seeing, I think. I often wonder, to be honest with you, when I put my tinfoil hat on, is that what all this is for? Is it just, do they want technocratic totalitarian style governance like a Chinese communist system, neoliberal technocracy? The people have no say, but hopefully the state is benevolent. And you know what I mean? Like I know I'm getting a little off in the weeds, but I don't know, man. What is it? Like, have we not proven conclusively with history that these controlled fascist and communist societies are not very good? Like they don't offer quality of life to people. Like, I don't know why we're still trying to run these experiments again.
It's the people. Like when you get them in sufficient numbers, it's very difficult. It's very difficult for me to go to them and talk to them for 25 minutes and say, this is the problem. It's very easy for Justin Trudeau to say, we want fairness for all generations, which doesn't
Yeah,
mean
yeah,
anything.
sure. Well, it actually means equity. It means
Well, yeah.
generational equity. So, oh, you're actually 70 years old and you worked for 40 years and retired. Why should you have more than an 18-year-old? It's all thinly veiled Marxist rhetoric. I'm not going to go too nerd on you here, but I'll explain a little bit of it. It's Marcusean critical theory. Marcuse and his critical theory, it's a reductive theory where he conceptualizes everything through the oppressor and the oppressed. So I mean, and to achieve equity, you're getting into straight communist rhetoric, and that's why I have no problem using strong language to describe it like that, because I know the academic origins of it. So you got Marcusean critical theory, which led to she was a student of his, was Angela Davis, with her critical race theory. You got Paulo Freire with his critical pedagogy, social and emotional development. Um, I mean, it's all Marxian, and it all came from the Frankfurt School of Academia, and it's infiltrated broader society. It was initially the humanities departments of academia. It then, as these people were graduating and leaking out into broader society, it manifested itself in a most pernicious way is in DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is straight up westernized Maoism. I mean, that's a little sensational of a claim, but I really don't see it any other way. And they implement Marxian framings. Like there's a term called conceptual polysemy. That's when you say a term like diversity. Hey, diversity, that sounds pretty good and innocuous. Diversity even sounds good. It sounds positive. But when you learn the way that they use it, the disingenuous way they utilize it, what they're saying is absence of the perceived racial hegemony. So absence of a race. It's not diversity. It's saying we're going to exclude a certain segment of the population because we view them as hegemonic. Now, again, I'm going way off in the weeds with
Oh,
the
that's
critical
okay.
theory, but it's truly at the heart of a lot of this. And I think if people understood that so much of this is relative to like fallacious conceptual framings, and if we could educate people, truly educate people, I always recommend Thomas Sowell. Like, just read some Thomas
Bureaucracy,
Sowell,
yeah.
because even if you've been inundated with this postmodernist Marxian rhetoric your whole life, Thomas Sowell is the antidote. Read, check out some Milton Friedman. Like, just learn something that's outside of the sphere of what the system and the state is telling you to learn. And you could see this for what it is immediately. It's almost like a red pill just in that.
All right, JP, hold on to that thought for just a moment. We're going to go to two comments. Kirk Reese, good day, Payment and JP. Thanks for standing and speaking up and sharing the truth. You're welcome, Kirk.
Awesome.
And Prairie, that's what I think as well, that Carney Clown may try that UBI, Universal Basic Income, and sheeple will bite that hook. So
That honestly, that's a valid point. The UBI carrot. I mean, we have a very ill-informed electorate. They don't understand a modicum of economics, and we're going to dangle a carrot of never having to work again. Hey, man, that entices me a little bit, and I know better. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's quite the carrot to dangle in front of a desperate population. So that's a scary thought, honestly. If he can make his case, and Carney's a rhetorician, he's skilled with rhetoric, much more so than Justin Trudeau. I mean, that's just hard to watch, man. But so yeah, it's scary. Is the malleable electorate of Canada going to be receptive to some kind of a UBI thing? That's very frightening.
yeah, desperate people will believe anything.
Sure.
JP, so going back to your little nerdy comment, I wanna one up your nerdy comment. So I saw this picture. You obviously know what a Hegelian dialectic is.
Yes.
I don't really, I wouldn't be able to give a lecture on it, but basically, like, you argue two different
Thesis,
sides.
antithesis,
Yeah.
antithesis, synthesis.
So somebody had this picture, and it was called like a Hegelian dialectic, like multiple attack vector. And so he shows like this, this jet going above, and it drops a bomb, and it's like Trump Russia gate, and everyone's looking at that. And the guy's saying, like, while you're looking at that, the jet's dropped its next payload, COVID, and like everyone's looking at that, and it's dropped the next payload, Ukraine. Like they're constantly hitting us with these big problems, and while we're focused on that, we should be looking up and saying, hold on, like, what's the next attack?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have to acknowledge what's going on. There's people manipulating politics behind the scenes. I mean, it's ironic to me that Alex Jones was right on a lot of things. Again, I don't want to unload all of that too much, because it is conjecture, and it's kept in the realm of conjecture for a reason. There's no credible information in order to vet anything. So we have to theorize about it. I often say, and I probably heard this from someone, but the minute they stop conspiring, we shall stop theorizing. I mean, like that's kind of the position we're in. There's clearly some nefarious forces behind the scenes that are trying to push things in certain ways to benefit economically or power wise, to consolidate their power and influence. And I think Canadians and Americans and people all over the West, we got to wake up and really see what's going on. And we got to start to scrutinize our public servants. And I don't like to call them our leaders. I like to call them our public servants, because again, it goes back to my framing. The best way for a healthy democratic society is to have a well-informed electorate that is constantly scrutinizing public servants. And when you have that, then you're only going to get public servants that know that they're going to be scrutinized. You know what I mean? So like the disingenuous man, or the man that's self-interested, isn't going to get into that realm of work, because he knows they're going to eat me alive. Like, I'm full of shit, and I know I'm full of shit. If I put myself out there, they're going to point it out. So I think just naturally it would benefit the system. But again, I'm going off in the weeds. To get back to Canada, it's like, what do you think, honestly? Like, what should we do? Like, I hate to be crude or vulgar, but we're seemingly fucked.
I mean, so the fixing Canada is very easy. Like, we only have to do a couple of dozen things. The problem is doing those things in the face of like unions that want to kill you,
That's right.
Judges that want to kill you, senators that want to kill you, and people that are literally starving, and they want to live till tomorrow.
And the media that wants to kill you too, right? That's the biggest thing. Like, you don't have an honest media that can actually convey, the purpose. They're going to demonize you because they're part of the establishment. And it's an insurmountable struggle, really. And I'm not trying to be cynical about it. I think cynicism is the language of the demoralized. And though I did mention we are demoralized, I don't interpret myself that way. I'm a perpetual optimist. I want to do better. I just don't see very many practical solutions, especially considering the damage that Trudeau has done with the appointments. I think I don't know the exact number, but it's hundreds of judges that are essentially radical progressive activists. It's 80% of our Senate. And again, like I think in some instances, the parliament can push forward something without Senate approval, but it's rare. It's super rare, if ever, from my understanding. Mind you, it was a couple of web searches I did to check.
Let me jump in. Your question was, what can we do? There are certain things that we can do. The first thing is what you and I are doing. Like
Yeah,
for citizen to citizen conversation has probably got the least amount of bias. Like media to citizens, the worst. So
absolutely.
if every single Canadian today started their own podcast and started talking to each other, it would solve a huge chunk of the problem. Another problem is that we're poor. Like we're strapped for cash and we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So like reducing our expenditure, how much money we spend. I'm not trying to be insensitive to people that are living paycheck to paycheck, but like reduce the vacations you go on, reduce how much you eat out.
Well,
Like
that's being done out of necessity, and it's unfortunate, but that is what we have to do. Like I said, I even had to go so far as renting out space in my home in order to comfortably exist in this economy, especially in the city. Like I say, I'm in Halifax, so real estate is. I don't know comparative to other big cities in Canada, but Halifax is up there, man. And the difference between Halifax and other big cities in Canada is we have no economy in Halifax. There's not even 1 million people in Halifax. There's like 600,000 people, and many of the people just don't have the income to sustain life with the influx in expenditures. I get what you're saying too, man. Like I try to be very fiscally conservative. I struggle with that. I'm a working class dude, I guess. Kind of goes along with the territory, but I do understand the importance of that. But at the same time, I think it's just so unfair because the working class has no quality of life presently. Um, Even people in better situations than me, like, and again, I'm not offering pragmatic solutions. It sounds like I'm kind of bitching about it, but I'm just trying to make a credible case to then find resolution. I didn't find it insulting that you
no, that's
suggested
fine.
that. Um,
What I meant was like
I agree with you. I just think it's far beyond that in most realities for most working people I know.
the other thing that the legislature can do, Parliament, federally, they could just literally shut it down. Be like, you know what? We're not going to pass a single law in the next 4 years because we know it's not going to pass. We're just going to have hearing after hearing after hearing. We're going to. They should just do hearings on every one of the radical senators. Like
Yes,
turn
yes.
that into a national citizens inquiry.
Yeah, and I heard Polyev allude to the fact that we need more participatory action in Canada politically. But I mean, we're going to need I mean, we got to get past the Senate. Like, we need reformation. I truly think Canadian system requires some restructuring. I hear a lot of fans of the parliamentary system. I very facetiously making my case for the 51st state. Now, a lot of people misinterpret it. I explained it again ad nauseum. I do think it would be better for Canada, but I don't think it's going to happen. A lot of people are under the impression that I think that this is more than Trump trolling. It could be. There could be some things behind the scenes, but it's more just a thought experiment. I think it's an amazing time to really reflect some of the differences. And I had a Canadian. I was making a case for this on X, and I had a Canadian say, "Well, you just don't understand the history of your country." He said, "Canada is not about life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness." I mean, Sir John A. Macdonald famously during the Confederation debates said that he wants a strong centralized government and centralized authority so we can actually have an influence over our economy. And it's like, dude, you're making my case for me. Like that's nothing I'm interested in, and I don't care how historically significant that is. Most Canadians do not understand that. Most Canadians don't look. Just for instance, I work in a facility in Halifax. It's a blue collar facility. It's a plant. I'm not going to go into specifics, but there's probably roughly 300 people there, 350 on different shifts. In the front office, there's university educated people, lots of engineers and other specialists and engineering technologists, and we build machines and we produce things here. And then we have a bunch of working class guys, good guys, smart guys, salt of the earth type people. I love these people, but nobody knows what's going on. I'm talking about politics, and I can go to the boss, top engineer, and he has no idea what's going on politically in Canada, even though it influences him directly relative to the potential for interrupting his business. The apathy and the complacency cannot be understated. I think if we could successfully like make Canadians pay attention, I think we would see immediate change. I sincerely feel that way too. That's half the reason I'm trying to scream it from the rooftops as I'm in.
So there is a grassroots movements that started, and people have their own Zoom calls and these little mini freedom groups. It's a start.
That's
I
right.
think what the problem, the challenge that we're facing, so many Canadians are scared. They put their faith in the Conservative Party, and they're hoping that everything will be hunky dory come the next election.
Mm.
I suspect the next 4 years for Canada will be very, very bad, and then that people will start waking up.
I did a podcast earlier with a small account on here, a libertarian individual from New Brunswick. His name escapes me, and when I was on his podcast, your name escaped me. So at least I'm equitable in my forgetting names of people. But we got into it a little bit, and I don't want this to be a prediction, but to speak candidly, like when I talk to my wife about this, who's very non-political, she doesn't understand really what's going on. She hears my rants, but she's not someone to entertain any of these type of discussions. But I said to her, I said, honey, like I don't think you understand how serious everything is presently in Canada, like politically. I said, there's a possibility that Confederation could fail in the next year. And I mean, again, I don't want this to be a prediction, and I'm not trying to like to say anything that's too out of the realm of possible, but look at like Danielle Smith in Alberta, for instance. Like, here's the federal government in Canada that's not allowing her to take her product to market. That's the imposition they're trying to put with these neo-Malthusian environmentalists like Stephen Gilbert, or however you say his weird ass name. You know what I mean? Like this is the kind of stuff they're pushing on Alberta, and Alberta are strong people, man. She's the only one that's invited to Trump's inauguration. Alberta happens to be the most resource rich province in Canada. Like, what happens if Alberta pulls out? What happens if Saskatchewan? I mean, there's so many variables presently geopolitically, and we don't know what Trump knows. Like, does he have intel? Because we know that there's 11 treasonous MPs in the Canadian Parliament. We've gotten zero accountability on it, but we know that's the case. And for some reason, no one's really too concerned about that. Like, people calling for an election considering that is mildly disconcerting, to be honest. But like, does Trump have some like? Is there just seems to me, like, again, you know what I do professionally. I have no credentials, but as a discerning individual with a pulse, when I look at all this, I don't know, man. I'm not even going to go to where I'm going to go. It seems like there's way more that meets the eye. It seems like potentially there's some disclosure that's coming. I'm very curious to see what happens after Trump's inaugurated, because I hear a lot of discourse on X regarding Greenland, Mexico, and Canada having some kind of a union economically. But I wonder if it's not a national security issue, which isn't talked about, because we know the Chinese Communist Party has interfered in some of our elections. Is that relevant to Trump? Because it would be if I was Trump. I'd be like, yeah, well, Canada seems like they're a shit show right now. Excuse me for being vulgar, but can I trust them to make sure that, you know, our border is safe? Can I trust them to make sure that they're not facilitating criminal organizations, and they're not dealing with the Chinese Communist Party, and they don't have secret Chinese police stations in Toronto? Like, I think Trump has other concerns that a lot of people are missing the point of relative to how tumultuous the political climate is presently.
My theory is that in 2020, the globalists they stole the election from Trump, and he's
100%.
managed with the support of the people. Like, this was the precinct strategy. This was like grassroots support that got him reelected, and now he's turning his sights on Canada, because Canada, like, we're not even functioning as a country anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, look at this: 300,000 passports go missing. There's terrorists running around. There's drug cartels everywhere. 11 treasonous MPs. Nothing gets done.
Mm-hmm.
And he probably had like like a, I don't know, a dossier or, you know, a one-page summary or something. They're like, sir, this is what's everything that's wrong with Canada. He's like, all right, we got to get in and fix this.
Absolutely. Well, just look for instance, since the election results, for America, right away, I think it was Olaf Scholz, Merkel's successor in Germany. His government had a no confidence. Immediately thereafter, Macron in France, another globalist puppet, he suffered a no confidence. Then, like Elon and Trump and everyone's all over Keir Starmer right now, who has essentially turned the UK into a communist state, as far as I'm concerned, an authoritarian state to say the very least. And then you got Trudeau that fell. Like, there's a new sheriff in town, man. The whole realm of the geopolitical sphere it's realigning. Power structures are realigning. It's very scary and potentially exciting too. I mean, if we can really go with some kind of liberty movement, some kind of movement for the citizens, let's make Canada and America what they were intended to be. Self-governed places. You know what I mean? Now, Canada wasn't intended to be a republic, but it sure as fuck should be. Again, pardon my vulgarity. I clean toilets for a living, sir.
No, it's okay. Yeah, I would love if Canada was a republic, because I look at the like the U.S., especially the republic before they made the amendments. Like the senators are
Mhm.
appointed by the states, apportioned taxation. Like I kind of wish we had things like that.
The
Um,
inalienable rights aspect too, right? Like, I think it was one of the founding fathers famously said the only way the republic can be kept would be by people of certain faith or high moral integrity.
Moral,
I'm
yeah.
definitely paraphrasing there, but I mean, that says a lot because it's kind of a precondition for any successful society. You can't have people with no morals or self-serving interests or total like atheist materialists that are just overvalue their own existence in this world. I think that serves people in a disingenuous way when people they're that atheistic or they're that materialist in their view that their life and their existence is everything. Again, not to bring it into a psychological realm, but I think it has some relevance on it all. But as for me, man, like just again, it's changing so fast, the landscape in Canada. It's hard to even keep up, let alone know where you stand on particular issues. My loyalty when I've again with this America stuff, the 51st Strat, I have people calling me a traitor. It's like, look, man, my loyalty first and foremost lies with my family and my community and my neighbors. I think what's best for them, not some archaic sense of national pride in a country that in many tangible ways, sir, does not still exist. I mean, it just simply doesn't. And I'm not being pessimistic I'm just trying to call it like I see it. Um, Something radical, something dramatic or drastic has to happen. I hear people calling for a trucker convoy 2.0. Maybe we could refine it. Let's go into all of the capital cities, be overtly peaceful. I mean, that's the main premise of it. The minute you're not peaceful, it's not going to work. But something big has to happen like that, or something from Trump, some pressure from our southern neighbors. But we need, number one, if the public is going to make an informed decision on electing any MPs, we need to know if they're working for the Canadian people, their constituents, or if they're representing nefarious foreign actors. That just, I don't know, man, call me crazy, but that seems like very relevant information for an electorate to make an informed decision. And no one's beating that drum loud enough. Like what's
just
going
just
on? Like, it's
let's
wild.
just put this in context here. 11 members of parliament that they're known for at least cooperating with foreign governments, so treasonous MPs,
That's
and
right.
Canada's they're okay with it.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
go talk to 100
again,
people.
it's apathy, man. Like I said, all of these people, I use my plant as just an example because, and it's true, nobody knows what's going on. Nobody's paying attention. Why? Is it relative to their distractions? Like the economy's really hard. Everyone's working extra hard. Is it relative to how good these bread and circuses are? We don't just have bread and circuses now, sir. We have Uber Eats and we have Netflix. Like, you know what I mean? Is the apathy hardwired in structurally? Can we get past that apathy? Can we make them realize like what's going on? Like that's kind of where I'm at with it all. And I really feel that because nobody knows what's going on. We're in echo chambers on here, bro. Like you come on X and it's the people that know what's going on, or at least have a better grasp of it. So when we see each other on here, it's like, yeah, you know what I mean? We can have a little bit of optimism. Go out in the real world, go to the mall and ask some questions randomly to people, and you'll go home and you won't sleep well. I promise you, you won't, because nobody has a clue what's going on. No one's paying attention. And we're driving off a cliff. We're the ship is veering into like very tumultuous waters, and there's no one steering, and the crew isn't even paying attention. The crew has no idea. Like I'm getting into analogy after analogy,
Massive
but it's the only
iceberg
way.
right ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, man, it paints a grim picture, but I really think we have to shock people into paying attention. How do we do that? I have no idea. I
So
mean, it's
I can give you some hope, some words of optimism. 1 year ago, if I said anything bad about the government, they would have just told me to get the hell out. Now, when
hmm,
I go to dinner parties and when I go to parties, when I talk to people, at some point, one mother is going to start complaining about what's going on in her kid's school.
yeah.
Uh, it's usually the mothers. One mother is going to complain about how they had to wait 4 hours in the hospital. So,
Hmm.
so now that it's affecting them, they're starting to wake up.
Yes, and that's something I've noticed as well too, right? Again, though, what worries me is a lot of them are waking up. Like I have a lot of friends that are feeling economic stress because of the economy, and then they read the paper, they flick on their TikTok or whatever the hell they do, and then they come back at me, yeah, that's those greedy grocers. It's the
Yeah,
greedy corporate grocers, and I'm like, whoa, dude, no, it's not. Who told you that? And then well, look at it, it's on the CBC here. And it's like, oh, well, that's propaganda, man. You're crazy. You tell someone that the CBC is propaganda that's not in our world, the normies, so to speak, and they look at you like you got three heads, man. Like, and they just dismiss you then. So this is the level that you're dealing with, right? Like they've just been, like I read a book recently by Matthias Desmet. It was titled "The History of the Psychology of Totalitarianism," and he gets into mass formation psychosis, or as it's presently known, mass formation. And I see, obviously, that's what occurred during COVID. A lot of the narratives, but I see aspects of this within the populace just generally. It's like they derive such security from these narratives that any deviation from said narrative inspires immediate panic. And then that the response to the immediate panic is to like devour any deviant notion. Like if you have any deviance from their orthodoxy, they're going to devour you. And it's scary because that's the kind of stuff you're seeing right now.
So I'm going to tell another story to take away any hope I just tried to instill in you. I was at a party and this guy found out I was running for the PPC, and he's a left wing person, and he's asking me the question. He's like, "Why do you love America so much? Why do you love their constitution?" And I was like, "I don't know. What's your views on the U.S.?" And he goes, "Canada's constitution is superior to that of America's because their rights are unlimited, whereas ours are limited, which allows the government to act more effectively and efficiently." And I'm just looking at this guy. I'm like, oh man, we're so screwed.
Yeah, it's like you're totally cucked, bro. Like why would you trust? And for your family, I hope you don't have children. Like any man that's like you're just going to appoint power and hope that the power doesn't go tyrannical. Like, do you not know anything about history? Even like benevolent leaders can wane towards tyranny. No, you need checks and balances for power. The role of the citizenry has to be adversarial against the state, or it doesn't work. It inevitably gets into this, like I heard Steve Bannon call it a neo-feudal system. The elites have so much power in the West, it's created almost a neo-feudal system where we're all just serfs in some
Yeah,
capacity.
he says Russian serfs. We're like
Yeah,
Russian serfs.
I like the analogy, and I again, I don't when I mention people or quote them, I don't align with anyone specifically entirely. Like I can separate the wheat from the chaff with people, but there's so many people on varying ends of the political spectrums that are saying relevant things. I mean, we have to find out where we can come and find common ground on. What issues can we get solidarity on to kind of coalesce the populist right and the populist left to where we can really make this movement for liberty give the power back to the people in some capacity? Because that's what we need. These institutions are just irredeemably corrupted. They need to be restructured in some real fundamental way. And I don't know if there's a political mechanism to do that in Canada. And that's kind of where I am with my black pill. Like The ones because again, I was in denial about Pierre for a long time, and I was like everyone else. I told myself the same thing, like, oh, he has to, he has to get in first, and then he'll do what I want. Even though he's afraid to talk about it now, I'm going to have faith that this man, who's been a career politician, is going to do what he's not saying he's going to do when he gets in there. And it got to the point where it's just demoralizing. And then when you kind of frame that in what's happening with Trump, saying like, hey, Canada, come on down, I'll cut your taxes, you'll be strong and safe, you get the Second
You get
Amendment.
guns. Yeah, you get
You
those
know
sweet,
what I
sweet
mean?
guns.
There's a lot of Canadians, like conservative Canadians, that are just like, wait a minute, right? And then you got your regime, your bootlicking regime apologists. How can you make an argument for the sovereignty of a nation that truly endeavors to eliminate your individual sovereignty? Right now in Canada, we have bills that are trying to be passed that will subordinate all rule to the WHO during a pandemic. Bill C-63 that will take away your speech rights under the guise of the subjective and ambiguous interpretation of hate speech. You can't draft legislation that utilizes subjective terminology like hate because there's no way to point to it. So it's subjective. And we know this, like it's a thinly veiled guise for pure censorship. And this is the country that you're willing to defend right now. It boggles the mind for me, man. And it comes to some kind of a sense of national pride in a country that in many tangible ways does not exist.
Like somebody should. This is a very contentious issue right now, but somebody
Oh, it
should do
is.
on a
And I'm taking
blackboard.
heat for it.
No, 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 no. Like, what are the benefits of joining the U.S.? What are the benefits of staying Canadian?
That's right.
And it'll probably just be like nothing on the Canadian side. You got some social issues, but like your culture. But even that, like I thought our prime minister said, we're a post-nationalist state and we're
That's right.
racist.
Our culture would be whatever Canadian culture is. And I think it's real. Like there's a culture in Canada. Whatever it is would be more maintained by becoming part of the United States. That to me is just obvious. We're not going to lose our culture by joining the US. We're going to secure it. Texas is still very much Texas, and California is still very much California. There's a thing in America. It's great. It's called states' rights, and this administration seems to really want to get back to that. That was what was behind Roe versus Wade. A lot of low resolution thinkers thought that was about abortion. It wasn't.
Oh my
It
God,
was
yeah.
about the right of a people to make their own governance, right? Like I live in a state, and say I'm in Utah, in Mormon country, and I don't want abortion. Like that should be my right as that state. And we could still have unity. I've been saying this. Here's my slogan for Pierre Poilievre. Say we can have unity without uniformity. So in the United States, you see that. There's no uniformity of political thought. There's lots of varying interests, but they can still have unity. You know what I mean? There's a union where there's common interests shared. And that's amazing for me. That's how we have to do it. Like you look at like the European Union, and that's a whole different thing. That's like the opposite of what the United States could be. Like provided Trump is actually able to give the states back a bit of their governance and just decimate the federal government. Javier Milei style, break that chainsaw out. And that's what needs to happen in Canada too. Small government makes big citizens. Big government keeps citizens small. Um,
There's a graph. I'm not going to try to Google it right now, but it shows the taxes in the U.S. as a percentage of GDP.
mm,
And if you go back to like 1776, it was, first of all, it was way lower, but it was mostly municipal taxes. If you look at it now, not only is it way higher, it's mostly federal taxes. So
yes.
tax power, freedom, liberty, decision making, it's going away from the individual and it's moving towards the federal
Well,
government.
it's just all being centralized. Power is becoming centralized. Now, I view power analogous to how I view nuclear energy. Now, just let me go with this for a minute. Now, nuclear energy, you have like a Fukushima or a 3 Mile Island or Chernobyl. It's very dangerous if these facilities melt down and you get, fallout and all of the negative repercussions. But what happens if you decentralize nuclear energy and you have small decentralized units? It's going to mitigate the potential for massive disaster. I view the government the same way. I've studied the Bolsheviks. I've studied Nazi Germany. I've studied Maoist China. And I think the government is one of the most destructive forces on earth. It can be. It can also be beneficial to people. I'm not hardcore anarchist or anything, but I really think we got to find a balance there, and we definitely have to decentralize right now. The less government, the less potential for subjugation, the less potential for mass starvation, the less potential for war. We need decentralized government, and that's how I kind of frame a liberty or a populist movement. That's how I would like to see it manifest itself and change. I want to see more people getting involved locally. Essentially, what you're doing, sir, with the PPC. Like you're tired of just complaining about it. You're going to get in and you're going to try to be some change. But I think that's definitely a relevant thing to talk about. Listen, man, I got about 15 minutes before my wife comes in, and I got a 150-pound cane Corso.
Don't do this to me, bro. I thought we were gonna go for another 2 hours.
Listen, man, I easily could, and I definitely want to chat with you again, man. It was a great conversation. So definitely keep in touch with me, and we'll arrange something again very soon. Like I said, I'm trying to really push my presence on X right now. I've experienced a bit of momentum fortuitously, and I got a lot of articles on there too. Just for your audience, I'll give my handle. It's at Semper Veritas X on the X platform. There's lots of articles in my profile. There's lots of interesting posts in my highlights. I try to remain as non-biased and detach my ego from my positions as I can. I'm only human though, so I'm very flawed. But yeah, man, it was awesome talking to you. I love what you're doing. I very much enjoyed the topics, and we'll definitely do this again, sir. I'm sorry I had to cut it short, but my fear is, like I was saying, my wife's going to come in and my dog is going to go absolutely batshit crazy because my wife is home, and it's just going to disrupt everything, and I don't want to be a disturbance.
I'll let you go. I'll just end with this, JP. You are a high, what do they call it? High information voter. You're highly educated, well, intelligent. And we need every Canadian to be like you. If we could get another 40 million like you, we'd be fine. So thank you.
Thank you very much for the conversation, sir. We'll be in touch again. I very much look forward to chatting some more and seeing if we can collaborate on some other things in the future. Who knows?
Sounds good. Take care and have a good day.
Take care, man. Bye.